pleased this morning to get a chance to interview one of the leading statesmen in dentistry, the director of the National Institute of Dental Research, Dr. Harald Loe. Harald, welcome to our cameras and to our studio.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
We're going to be spending the next little bit of time getting a chance to know more about you, and I've had a chance to go through piles of papers and speeches and getting to know a little bit about the kind of things you said. And one of the things that's been interesting to me is how many times at the beginning of your speeches you start with, "These are exciting times," and "These are interesting times we live in." And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what's getting you excited.
It's true. These are exciting times. I've been in this business now for more than 40 years, and I haven't seen anything like it. This is a very exciting time. Some people will say to you that this is the worst of times, or this is the best of times. I think I agree with that. There are some wrinkles on the whole situation, but basically the dentistry, the ferment that I see in dentistry at the moment, and what's going on, these are fundamental changes that are to the better for the population, for the profession, and not the least the science of the oral health care area. So no, I'm very excited about what's going on at the moment, but I'm also very bullish on the future. I think we are at crossroads, and I think what we're going to happen next is not going to happen overnight, but on the long term it's going to be a very intriguing development within the profession and what we call dentistry, and what probably in the future has more to do with oral health care rather than just dentistry.
You've now been director of the NIDR for 10 years now. And when you look back on those 10 years, what are the things that you're particularly excited and proud of in terms of your accomplishments?
Oh, I think that is not so much my accomplishment as it is a move on the part of the entire oral health sciences into the mainstream of biomedical research. I think our scientists are as good as any scientist. I think the problems we deal with are fundamental and may have impact as much on dentistry as they have on other healthcare disciplines. So I think the real issue here, or the real advancement that we have seen, is that dental research or oral health research is mainstream biomedical research. Now, having said that, I think there are some real highlights in dental research that are more immediate to the dental profession, and I think that during my time, we have seen the ultimate and maximal use of the fluoride story. And it has brought about a very different level of oral care or oral health to the young generations of this nation. But I've also been part of what I call a second revolution in dentistry, which was the discovery that both caries and periodontal diseases were infectious diseases. And having arrived at that stage of knowledge and understanding of the diseases, I think we have had a much more of a clinical management of these diseases at a very different level. I think the oral health situation in the United States is probably not only unprecedented, but it's also not superseded by any other nation that I know, any other population. The fact that 50% of the school children of America, school children under 18 years of age, 50% of them have never had a cavity. They've never had a filling. And those that have tooth decay, they have much smaller lesions, much fewer lesions than than their age mates had, let's say, 10, 15 years ago. And we also see this reduction in tooth decay spilling over into the generations that are 20, 25, 30 years old. So clearly something very fundamental has happened in terms of influencing the oral health of this nation.
And how about periodontal disease?
Well, as I said, the fact that periodontal diseases are caused by bacteria was discovered in the late 50s, early 60s. And since that time, we have had a whole new paradigm in the clinical management of periodontal diseases. And I think now, 30 years later, we're beginning to see some effect of what has happened. Oral hygiene is the important factor in prevention and maintenance or control of periodontal diseases. The oral hygiene of the American people is so much different today than it was 40 years ago. Everybody owns a toothbrush. Everybody's using it. And the level of oral hygiene is just absolutely unbelievable. We have had better nutrition. We have a better socioeconomic circumstance. So people are seeing their dentist on a regular basis, and they're more interested in maintaining healthy dentitions and retaining their teeth. And I think that is really what is happening at the moment.
So are you seeing an end to caries and periodontal disease?
Well, I see an end to caries and periodontal disease in terms of being the general public health issue. I really see not only the elimination of caries and periodontal disease within a foreseeable future, but I also think it is a feasible thing. Caries will always be around, but it won't be in every individual, and it will not be would not be commonplace. It will be a certain number of people with high risk for caries, for one reason or another, are more susceptible to the disease, and the same is true for periodontal diseases. Today in the United States, periodontal diseases are not the main cause of tooth loss in the adult population. We have seen a tremendous change, and this is reflected also in the number of natural teeth that you find in the average adult American. 50% of America's working population has lost less than one tooth. These are people that are between 18 and 65 years old. So in that general area, we are retaining more teeth and we are eliminating dentures in that mainstay of the population. However, the problem is in the senior citizens. Those that are 65 and beyond have the most caries, they have the most prevalence and the highest severity of periodontal disease, and they have fewer teeth than anyone else. 50% of the senior citizens have lost all their teeth. And those who still have teeth have, as I say, a pretty bad situation. Probably the most suffering, most pain are found among our senior citizens.
What implications does that have for the National Institute of Dental Research?
Well, I think we, after having done these children's surveys and the surveys of the national surveys of the adult and senior populations, I think we decided that we'll have to do something about it. In the past, we have concentrated on children. We had carried the fluoride story to its ultimate use out there in the population, and I think we are seeing the benefit of it. Just to give a little sideline here, the prevention of tooth decay in the younger generations can be translated into tremendous savings of money. We reckon that we save, let's say, $2 to $3 billion per year because of the reduction in caries among children. And we realize that this is going very well. 60% of the population is on fluoridated water. The other 40% plus the 60%, they are using toothpaste that has fluoride, and they're using them. I think that caries prevention with the use of fluoride is going full force, and we don't need to tamper with it, although we'll have to be vigilant and continue to see to it that these systems work. However, from an NIDR point of view, I think there's no question that we need to do something about the adult population and the senior citizens. Mm-hmm. So what we are doing at the moment is trying to find new ways of preventing disease in the adult that can bring these people to a senior citizen level with their natural teeth in good shape. And these preventive strategies are somewhat different from the ones that we use for children. And that's where NIDR comes in at the moment, in trying to develop new ways of reaching out to the adult population that needs this type of prevention and control of the oral diseases in order to retain their natural dentitions for a lifetime. That's really the major content of what we call the Research and Action Program, which contains both a research agenda and a scientific transfer agenda and an action-oriented community program activity that has already started. So I would guess that within the next 30, 40 years, we are going to eliminate toothlessness in this country. And that would be the first country in the world, I guess, that would have gotten rid of toothlessness. And the rest of it is going to be an interesting story. I may not be around, but you may be around, Dick, to see what that kind of a world is like. But it's going to be different.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to just, what you just said really triggered something that you've. I wanted to just read something from a speech that you gave in 1990 in San Antonio at a celebration of research. It was called Celebration of Research Symposium. And it says, I look forward to further discussions of how we can get on with these efforts and with working with private industry, Congress, professional and consumer groups in ways that will be mutually beneficial and build a strong America in which all people share in health and prosperity.
Right.
And it sounds like it's not only the NIDR, but the need to build partnerships.
No.
And
I think that is the key to what has to happen here. I think the federal government is just one factor in the equation. I think probably that there is more potential action in the community and in industry and in private enterprise. And for this reason, we have allied ourselves with the American Fund for Dental Health. The American Fund for Dental Health is an organization that is trying to collect both resources and intellectual capital into bringing oral health to the next level. And I think what we are seeing at the moment is a commitment on the part of not only the profession, but also of some of the important voluntary organizations to participate in this thing. We had just a meeting in Irvine, California, that dealt with, or under the title, Oral Health 2000, which was a meeting or a workshop where 150 volunteer organizations, both from the profession and outside the profession, came together in order to discuss what do we need to do in order to get on with this agenda I'm talking about, of increasing the oral health of both not only the young, but the adult and the elderly. And it was a very impressive demonstration of what can happen here when all these groups come together. One important group was the American Association for Retired People. Now that organization has about 35 million people. And when they speak, somebody listens. And I must say the commitment on the part of these voluntary organizations was amazing in terms of signing up for a participation here of a major move towards bringing oral health to the entire nation.
And building a constituency for
and building constituencies. So we need some time to let all these forces come together and have impact. But there is a tremendous dynamism in this situation at the moment, and I like what I'm seeing.
I know you're very interested in dental education, and as a former dean, and
yes, I've
I'd
been very fortunate. You see, I've been in practice, I've been in teaching, I've been in research, and I've been in administration, and it's been a full circle almost, but it's been very interesting.
I want to read. If you give me a few minutes to sort of trace a couple of thoughts that have occurred over the years, and I'd like to read first something that was written in the Journal of Dental Education in 1978, and it just sort of reflects on some of the thoughts you've had. And it says, "I firmly believe that the time has come for all of us to accept the fact that in both scope and content, dental medicine is a clinical medical specialty. The dental educational process is indeed a program tailored for an early track into a specialty called dental medicine, and the initiation and development of dental education separate and independent of other subspecialties of medicine is an accident of history."
Yeah.
So that was you as a dean in 1978.
Right.
In 1986, this was at a symposium at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. Well, you went on to say, "I say this fully aware," and it's the same sort of thought, "that it is easier to move a graveyard than to change dental school curricula."
Right.
Now, I'd like to quote one thing from Dean's Conference, and it says, "The message that I want to convey is, hurry up, please, it's time. Time to get on with the business of reform and change." So there's a 13-year history on this, and I'm wondering if...
It's always a danger to put words into print. You can't really get away with it. This is going to haunt you the rest of your life. But let me say this, Dick. I haven't changed much opinion about this thing. I think over the last 20 years or more, I think I've been increasingly convinced about the fact that the separation of dentistry from the rest of medicine was an accident of history. I'm not going to retrace, the individual components in that accident, but those of us that know the history of dentistry know that what happened at the Baltimore College of Dentistry, or at the Baltimore College in it must have been 1839, where there were strong forces to try to incorporate dentistry into the medical curriculum, was rejected by the medical faculty. And that the next thing that happened was the establishment of the Baltimore College of Dentistry. Next door was an historic move on the part of the profession. And I think it, in many ways, was a very healthy move. I think dentistry over these 150 years has developed into a very forceful clinical discipline. And both in terms of its science base and in terms of its content, and it's more than anything else in terms of its outcome in terms of oral health. has proven itself as a very important health discipline. I think we are also seeing some developments in dental education that would indicate that, throughout the 150 years, we have been on our move and back to medicine. Mm-hmm. And I think that what is happening at the moment is here at NIDR is that we are more and more trying to connect the mouth with the rest of the body. Mm. And that is exactly what it's all about. And I think it has happened. Let me just point to the fact that in most dental schools today, in the educational programs, the basic science component is either shared with the medical students or, it is basically the same course. Mm-hmm. Now that's a very important development. And I think, you need the same basic science base for the physician of the mouth as you need it for the eye and the nose and the ears. And I don't see any difference. I really don't. However, I think dentistry has benefited from going it alone for these 150 years. But I now think it's time. We have all the self-confidence. I think we all have all the content in professionally and academically to join the other clinical disciplines. And I think we're going to save time and money and increase the scope of the profession by doing that. I don't know how this organizationally would come about. I'm less interested in the structure of it as I am more intrigued by the content of it. So there may be many ways of doing this, and I think there is plenty of flexibility in this situation for anyone to somewhat sign on to the idea that we need to connect the mouth with the rest of the body, but it may not happen overnight, and as I've said also in writing many times, nothing worthwhile happens overnight, and it may take some time. But if we agreed that this is the way it's going, I think some of the curricular changes that we are talking about at any time would be adjusted to approach that goal, and it would be much easier for everybody.
What would you see as the dental education curriculum of the future, matching up with the Oral Health 2000 and the elimination of toothlessness?
Well, I think that it has already had an impact on some of the sub-disciplines of dentistry. Children's dentistry or pedodontics is very different today than it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, when almost every child had cavities. As I already told you, today children basically don't have cavities. However, there is a lot of preventive efforts that are going on in pediatric practice as well as in general practice. So prevention is getting to be a real substance and content of practicing dentistry. And this is not true only for the children, it is true also for the young adult and the mature adult, and it will be increasingly important. And I know that the American Dental Association just released numbers that would indicate that, during the last 10 years there has been a substantive increase in the time spent on prevention in general practice. So prevention is going to be a bigger topic for the future. Whether that's going to be managed clinically by auxiliaries of one kind or another, or they continue to be a major main or activity by the dentist. I don't know. I think it makes much sense to me that there is a team approach to these things, and that prevention is a very important part of practice, and therefore should be a very strong part of the curriculum. But the other part of the change is, of course, that prosthetic dentistry, as we have known it, in terms of complete dentures and toothlessness, or removable partial dentures, may be just museum pieces in the future. And that what is going to take the place would be a whole new restorative dentistry concept. And I'm including a new operative dentistry and also which has to do with the management of caries. But also replacement of teeth would be, a very different thing in the future. And taking the one thing first, for instance, I strongly believe that the 100-year-old concepts for operative dentistry are ready for change and for renewal. The cavity preparations that you and I were taught in dental school, there were black concepts for, black principles for cavity preparation, are no longer valid. There are two things that happen in operative dentistry. One is the realization that caries is not only a lesion, but it is a disease and should be handled as a disease and not a cavity. And I think we know the cause of this disease, and there are some diagnostic and even prognostic markers for this disease that will be used, increasingly in practice and, during in the educational process. I think, some of the markers in saliva and some of the microbiological features of the mouth are good markers of people that have this disease or will have the disease, and that the practicing dentist would have to make use of some of these diagnostic innovations. That's one part of it. And then, of course, you deal with the disease in terms of its management with, the total repertoire. So that, you change the diet, you change the lifestyle, you increase some of the preventive activities that should be part of modern lifestyle. And then, after that, you're going to do some, refined diagnostics and find the early lesions. And these early lesions today can be treated very differently from the ones that we treated in the past, when every little hole required a big cavity preparation. I think at this time, with the new materials, and especially the materials that adhere to the tooth structures, provide an entirely new opportunity for operative dentistry, at least to contemplate the approach to the first carious lesion, to the first cavity. It needs to be a very different management of that situation than what we have done in the past. And use of these new materials to substitute for amalgam and for other metallic materials of restoration. So I see here more use of synthetic materials that are cosmetically much more advantageous and or more attractive. But I also see this as part of trying to save tooth substance for the lifetime, because we know that replacement of fillings will occur, and every time we replace a filling, we remove more tooth substance, and in the end, the whole thing fractures and breaks, and we're back to a very complicated restorative situation. So with this kind of a concept for operative dentistry, we need some curricular changes and some changes of the approach to teaching operative dentistry. And at the other end, not only are we going to eliminate toothlessness, but probably the most frequent problem in terms of replacement of teeth would be single tooth replacement. Now, I think that one of the biggest things that have happened in restorative dentistry is the implant technology. I really do think that this has given a new life to edentulous people, and that they have an alternative today where they get their fixed constructions and fabrication of either bridges or prosthetic appliances that are very different from having the removable plates and the dentures. So I think that's a great development. But you know, as I said, we're going to run out of toothless people. And that probably the most important part of implantology lies in, you know, the use for single teeth that are lost. In other words, the 3-unit bridge will get some competition from, you know, single implants, where you don't have to destroy the next, you know, adjacent teeth in order to make that 3-unit bridge. No, I think that in the future, they may even see this situation where if you have to pull a tooth, you put a new one in. That's going to be implantology in the future. So all these things are happening in the clinical curriculum, along with the fact that, you know, most of the periodontal diseases can be managed by general practitioners. In the United States, in the population between 18 and 65 years old, in 1986, less than 10% of the adult population has a really advanced, you know, periodontal disease, and probably closer to 3–4%, you know, would require, you know, care by periodontists. All the rest of it should be taken care of by the general practitioner. And this increase in scope from a, you know, from a taking care of cavities on an everyday basis, you can see that, you know, there are changes in the practice content that are going to be quite radical, you know, and dramatic. And I think that the life of a general practitioner is going to be so much more interesting, and the scope of the practice is going to be, you know, a quite different framework for, you know, everyday life. And I think that's, you know, the prospect of dentistry at the moment is not that we are running out of disease, but it is that practice is going to be much more fun and meaningful, and probably also more prosperous.
Well, with this sense of the clinician, I want to return now to something that you had said earlier, which was a kind of a tracking your career through clinician, researcher, dean, director of NIDR. And I wonder if we might even start earlier than that and go back to your beginnings in Norway.
That's a long time ago. Yeah, well, I had a very, very happy upbringing. You know, when I think about my life as a child or as a young boy, I don't have a memory of one sad day. It's a funny thing, Dick. I had a very happy childhood, and I think, you know, somehow that has continued into an adult life. That's been, you know, very rewarding, interesting, and challenging in many ways. But there's been never a dull day.
Tell me about growing up in Norway.
Well, I grew up in a little farming town of 2,700 people, and it was in the bottom of a fjord in the middle of Norway. My home was a, you know, middle-class type of home where both my father and mother worked, and they had each one their own store. They were in retail business. And
what were they selling?
Pardon?
What were they selling?
Oh, my mother's was in ladies and children's clothing. My father had the distribution of all papers, weeklies, and all, you know, this reading material that the public needs. So it was, and tobacco, and a few, and chocolate, and, you know, a few other things. You know, they both were very productive, and, you know, made a lot of money. But it was still a very modest type of upbringing, and But the special thing about the whole thing wasn't really this middle-class framework. But I had a very capable mother. She was divorced. I mean, this was in 1920s, and this was her second marriage, and very astute. I mean, to take a divorce in those days and then get on with her business was a unique thing. The other part of the uniqueness of this couple was that my father was deaf, and he managed to be one of the most successful businessmen in that community.
Isn't that interesting?
Very sharp fellow, very intelligent, but he had meningitis as an 18-year-old, youngster, and lost his hearing, and had absolutely no education beyond 7 years of elementary school, and none of them had any education. They came out of farmers background, but as I say, it was interesting from my point of view because there was an ocean between my age and my father's age. He was 50 years when I was born. And it gave me a tremendous independence. I couldn't communicate with him well, as you would understand, although there were all sorts of body language and all sorts of reading the mouth and all sorts of communication. So I think we had a reasonable communication, but it was not really a father-son relationship. I was on my own, and I enjoyed that actually, and I was very active both in sports and and also in the religious activities. I liked the songs and the music both in the church and the Salvation Army and in the YMCA, and I was all over the place. And I did the skiing, the cross country, and the jumping and the skating, and I did the soccer in the summer and the gymnastics in winter time, and I played in the school band.
And you sang?
And I sang. And I played the clarinet and the saxophone in the dance band. I was very busy. I mean, and it was, as I say, a very happy, growing up. I was, doing all right in school. I wasn't the best. I was in the best part of the class and always, stayed on the right side. But
you were also pretty busy.
I was very busy, and I, sold newspaper and collected scrap iron and bottles and I made money out of it, and so it was a very interesting growing up. But let me tell you, the real component in my young life was the Second World War. The Second World War came to Europe September 1, 1939. I was 13 years old. And this was when Hitler started to move around. I mean, he invaded Poland at that time. England declared war, and France declared war at the same time. Half a year later, April 9th, the Nazi German army and navy and air force invaded Norway. And we woke up on one morning, and all these German soldiers were around, and also in the ports and in the air. I was approaching 14 years at that time, and I think that was one of the major factors that shaped my adult life. This was a fierce experience. I mean, there was not only torturing and terror, but we were running out of food, and they killed the intelligentsia. They drove the Jews into concentration camps. They killed people for no reason, and there was a tremendous impact on life. And as a young man, you grew up very fast under these conditions. And there was an underground development, in Norway throughout the 5 years of occupation. And we all were very much part of it. It was easy in the sense that, it was black and white. And growing up without all the other choices and all the other confusing factors was an easy thing. But it was a fundamental impact on me, at least. So I had to leave the country during the war. I was 17 years when I fled the country and went to Sweden into the Norwegian Army. And I stayed, in various parts of the Army during the rest of the war and after the war, and went through the military academy and I was developing into a line officer before the war was over, and I served in the Army a few years after the war. Then, of course, the peacetime was a different thing, so I entered dental school.
But there was a 3-year gap between the time that Norway was invaded and the time that you went to Sweden.
Yeah, that's when I went to college.
But in that period between 14 and 17,
yes,
you were in Norway during the German occupation.
Yes, that's right. That must have been high school years.
And what was that like for you?
Oh, it was awful. It was awful. I mean, we were all pretty scared in one way, but also determined that this cannot really continue. So there was, as I said, a lot of activities, both sabotage. The other part was that they had taken all our radios, so information was not available of what's going on in the world. And most of the activities, of government was in London. The king and the royal family and the government had fled and set up shop in London, and trying to maintain communication with the rest of the country. So the Germans found out that one thing is to destroy morale was to confiscate all the radios. And can you imagine? They rounded up all the radios in this country. And of course we built new ones, and that's how we kept information going. And I remember many nights, we used small, I had a cigar box, no bigger than an ordinary cigar box, with a new little radio, and we used earphones, and this was shortwave, and we could get the news from London during the war, and we spread the news, and of course that was not really legal at that time, so we were hounded down, and as I said, I had to leave the country because otherwise I would probably go to jail. So that was that. I think, as I said, has had a great impact on my outlook on life, and on how my younger years really were shaped.
I want to come back to the story of your early boyhood and the transition, and you mentioned fleeing Norway and coming to Sweden and joining the military there. I wonder if you could kind of pick up from that.
Well, it wasn't really much of a story, other than life in the military is pretty boring, and if there's no fighting going on. So the real excitement started when the armies started to move through Europe, and the Americans, the British, and all the rest of the Allied forces started to move up from France through Germany and finally into the Scandinavian territory. Both Denmark and Norway were liberated, so to speak, during the early days of May 1945. So that's when we moved in from everywhere. There were Norwegian forces in England, there were Norwegian forces up in the Lapland, that had joined the Russians coming in from that side. and we moved from Sweden into the heart of Norway. So we participated in cleaning up the area during the spring, and then all of a sudden the peace broke out. And that was a very different life. I mean, and we were all very happy, and we were young, and we did all sorts of things. And I really saw myself as an officer in the Norwegian Army for the rest of my life. And all of a sudden, when I got into 1948, and there wasn't really much fun in it. There was demobilization, there was demilitarization, and I think that everyone was looking for something else than war, and tried to get part of the peace. I married my high school sweetheart at that time, 1948, and I decided I have to do something else. So I sent in an application to a school of business administration and to dental school. These were the two places I sent an application.
Why dental school?
Well,
I'll also ask you why business school.
I wanted, it's a very simple and unromantic answer to that. I wanted a short education that could give me maximum outcome, and so I could sustain a family. That was the only motive I had, really. I knew dentists in my little town. I thought they had a pretty nice living, and I thought it must have been an interesting thing. But I also was somewhat contaminated by growing up in a business environment. So these were the two options that I saw for the next 4 years of education. And so I was I was allowed to choose between the two.
You were accepted in both?
I was accepted in both of them, and so trying to come to a choice here was a difficult thing. However, I chose dentistry, and I never looked back. I really think that was turned out to be a very interesting thing. I really liked it. I always liked it, and I enjoyed having practice. And I enjoyed.
You went to dental school back in Norway.
Yeah, but you see, everything was somewhat in shambles after the war. So we had two basic preclinical years in Oslo, and then they sent people around the world to get the clinical training.
I see.
We were sent to Sweden and to Karolinska in Stockholm, and others were sent to Scotland. To United States. There were plenty of them here, especially at Tufts, in the post-war years. So we got an interesting experience during our developmental years in dentistry. We got to see. I happened to see be part of 3 dental schools before the whole thing was over, which was an interesting thing because there were different people and different concepts. And I think that gave us a very nice background.
The 3 dental schools was?
It was Oslo, Stockholm, and Malmö in Sweden. Malmö was, a brand new dental school that they built in 1949-50. And so we were the first students to occupy an absolutely incredibly beautiful dental school with all new machinery and equipment and with a faculty that was young and pioneering, and it was a very nice experience altogether.
So you're now going through dental school with the intent that you're now going to graduate and have a practice and take care of your family.
Right. And when I finished dental school, I had no question of what I was going to do. I was going into practice. However, during my years at dental school, I also had developed a respect for the teachers and the faculty. So I always thought that that must be an interesting thing to be a part-time faculty and part-time practicing. So I started also as a part-time teacher the day I left dental school. So and I started in operative dentistry.
Do you remember some of the people who influenced you while you were in dental school?
Oh, I think there was no question that there were all clinical teachers. I was awed by the clinical faculty. I thought that was very impressive. I think back on my basic science training and the preclinical course with also with respect for the teachers. I think we had a teacher in neuroanatomy, for instance. His name was Brodal, and that was probably the greatest teacher I ever met. I never got to be friendly with him, but the way he taught neuroanatomy to me was an absolutely perfect teacher in terms of both trying to reveal what this mystery of the nervous system was all about, but also the way he handled students and got them challenged. So that was one of my early memories of excellence in teaching. But as I said, I was awed by the capabilities of the teaching of the clinical faculty, and I by and large I had made up my mind that I wanted to emulate some of these people that I had been exposed to during dental school. And so, as I said, I started to teach operative dentistry and endodontics at the same time as I set up my own practice.
In Oslo?
In Oslo. And then one day, I was sitting in the library and I had written a proposal for a research project in endodontics, which essentially had the ambitious goal of regenerating the pulp. Now, how is that for a young man that has never been in any scientific endeavor? I really wanted to use the patient's own blood and stem cells to create a new pulp. Well, it so happens that in Oslo they had just created a dental research institute, very small, and funded through the soccer pool, the football pool, money. And there were some 3, 4, 5 real sharp clinical researchers. One of them was Nigel Ostby, who was a good friend of Jake Friedland. Nigel Ostby was the pioneer in endodontics in Europe. And I went to him with this proposal. And he literally threw me out of his office. And the reason for that was that I was working for his worst enemy, who was the professor of operative and endodontics. So I was caught in the power game of endodontics, as a young man. And I had nowhere to go. So one day, as I said, I was sitting in the library at the dental school, and next to me was a man about, let's say about 48 to 50 years. His name was Jens Verhoeg. Verhoeg was working on his periodontal problems. He had already defended his thesis that was entitled The Gingival Pocket, where he, for the first time in periodontics, or in the history of periodontology, had started a systematic and scientific and experimental approach to the understanding of the pathogenesis of periodontal disease. And he had heard about my meeting with Dr. Nigel Ostby, and that I was thrown out of his office. So he very, very kindly asked me if I wanted to join him in research. And I was almost devastated from my first experience with these scientists. So I was very reluctant to go into another working relationship without giving it some thought. So I told him that I would have to think about it because of various reasons. But in my heart I was really burning to say yes. But I didn't want to say yes because I had been, I've been wiser, over the past few weeks, and so I said I was going to call him, and I couldn't wait, of course, to call him. I knew that this man, was a first-rate scientist, and that I had an opportunity here to get into science in a very different way. And so, after a few days, I called him privately at his home and told him that I was ready to go to work. And so we started a very, very productive working relationship where, not to exaggerate or to, do any self-aggrandizement here, but the two of us revolutionized paleontology in Scandinavia. And we got dental plaque into the proper place, both in terms of its relationship to periodontal diseases, but also its impact on the rest of dental care. So we had some very busy, interesting, exciting years, and that's where I got my first initiation.
Were you still practicing at this time?
I was still practicing and teaching and doing research, and I had thrown away my watch because I was also using the streetcar between places, and I didn't have a car at that time, so I was running around like crazy, and so I threw away my watch because I couldn't plan on getting that streetcar. That would have brought me into a mental state that I wouldn't be productive. So this was a 12-hour day, every day, and we enjoyed it, and we had absolutely an incredible time. And we published papers like you never saw. We cranked them out. And it was, as I said, a very productive time. So in the midst of this, I decided that I need to get out in the world. So I applied for a Fulbright scholarship to the University of Illinois. At that time, I was married, had 2 children, and I was given a Fulbright scholarship. I wanted to study bone and bone tissues. And in Chicago at that time, there still was a very strong group that originally came from Vienna in Austria before the World War II. The names were Gottlieb, Kronfeld, Orban, Sicher, Weinmann, Maury Masler, and others. University of Illinois was a power center at that time in dentistry. And I thought I was the luckiest man that got my paid trip across the ocean and $300 a month to support a family in Chicago for the next couple of years. And it turned out to be a very important stage in my life. And so I got more and more involved in the oral sciences and in research activity, and as you know, I never looked back.
So you and the wife and the 2 kids come to Chicago.
Can you imagine? Here we come from a little place, up in Norway, and landed among 12 million people in Chicago, windy city. I tell you, it was scary. It really was scary. We didn't know anyone. Those days were very different. We managed to get an apartment. We stayed in the YMCA for a week or so. We could get, on the same floor because we were a family. And this was on Wabash Avenue in Chicago. And we stayed there for a week, and the children must have been about 6 and 3, And it wasn't easy to run around trying to find an apartment, and we didn't know where to go. As I said, we found a place. And just to give you an idea what the communication was in those days, I must have been around for a month or two before Dr. Weinman, who was my host, asked me if I had gotten a place to live. I mean, it was a very different type of, a student support system. Right. And so we got my son into school, and we lived in a Puerto Rican neighborhood on the near north side of Chicago, up in Lincoln Park. And we had pretty basic circumstances, I would say. Rented furniture and a pretty dirty apartment. But as I also said, I mean, this strengthened the whole family, and I think we got, all four of us got an experience that very few others would have. And my children, they went to kindergarten and to school, and although they did not spend more than 1.5 years. When they grew up and were taught English in school, they picked up the Chicago dialect, that like nobody's business. It was an absolutely fantastic thing. So that was one part of it. But my meeting with American Oral Health Sciences at that time was of tremendous impact on my future life, as you understand. And I finished my thesis and defended my PhD at the University of Oslo. So I went back with my material and didn't finish the thing. And after that, I picked up on the periodontics again and taught and did research. And all of a sudden, there was a department chairmanship opening in Denmark and in periodontics. That was actually the first department of periodontology in Europe, because until that time periodontics had been taught either in surgery departments or in restorative dentistry or somewhere else, an operative. There was no such thing as a clinical specialty in periodontics at that time, and there was no department. Now, I had the pleasure of starting the first European department that was entirely devoted to periodontology. And this was in a new school, and I got a framework for periodontology and a curriculum in periodontology that they hadn't seen before, because we wanted periodontology to be as important to the dental students as prosthetics and operative dentistry. So I think we had a very interesting, unfortunate situation, and I had some faculty that we developed into a world-class faculty. And we had, over these 12 years when I was chairman of this, we had people coming from everywhere, from United States and from Latin America, from Israel, and from Asia and Europe to study what we were doing. We had a whole new approach to periodontology. And while Dr. Warhug continued and got his own department at the same time or later, but he was professor of periodontology. He took care of Norway, and I took care of Denmark, and we really brought them into the new modern age of dentistry.
What prompted then the move from Denmark to the United States again?
Well, as I said, I've been chairman for a dozen years, and we were very productive at that time. We worked very hard, and we had an exciting time. But somehow, I was ready for something else. When you've done this so many years and taught, and the curriculum, and you feel you're going in circles, and Henry Goldman, who started the dental program at Beth Israel in Boston, and also the first graduate school of dentistry ever at the Boston University. He had, by that time in 1968, 69, he had reached a point where he had a full-fledged dental school, and he was the dean, and he wanted an associate dean that should take over when he wanted to retire. So he asked me if I would come over and take a look at it. And I remember this very well. Inga and I, my wife, we were on our way to 6 Latin American countries where I was going to lecture. So we made a stopover in Boston to take a look at the thing, and we met with the president of the university, and we did most of the meetings with the faculty, and I got the sense of what this was all about. And I think that the time we left Boston for Venezuela, I guess, we had pretty much decided that this might be an interesting challenge. Well, before we got home, you have to realize that this time the Vietnam War was going full force. And America was in a turmoil. And before we got home, they killed Bob Kennedy. That was the end of it as far as I was concerned. I would not have any part of it. And I did not want, I had a son at that time that must have been 18, 19 years. And we decided that I would have to stay where we are because, this doesn't look too good. So I went back to my department in Denmark and did the things that I should do. And children grew up and left the home. And the next call came from University of Michigan. University of Michigan had a dental research institute supported by the NIDR, one of 5 dental institutes around the nation. The others were in Seattle, University of Washington. The other one, or the third one, was at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. The fourth one is University of Alabama at Birmingham, and the 5th was in Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina. These were very important dental research institutes that had as its prime purpose of trying to get more versatile people into dental research. People from other university departments, from medical school and from school of engineering and from pharmacy schools, and tried to get a broader recruitment to dental research. I was very intrigued by that challenge. And so, after all the negotiations and all the work, the preparations, we decided that we were going to Ann Arbor to join the faculty of University of Michigan and become the director of the Dental Research Institute.
I see. And so this was a position as director of the institute.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And that must have been in 1972. So again, we landed in Detroit, and I think we were very prepared to start an entirely new life. And there were a lot of challenges at Michigan at that time. I think we had, I think we had approximately $1 million in direct support for the institute, which was a lot of money at that time, and you can do a lot of things. As it developed, I didn't get to do all the things I wanted to do, I'm not sure that I need to elaborate on that. However, after a couple of years at Michigan, I was asked if I was interested in the deanship at Connecticut. University of Connecticut had started a new dental school in 1968 or thereabout. And this was 4 years later, or 5 years later. Must have been later because, or earlier because the first graduating class had not left, I guess, before when I got there. But anyway, because of the circumstances, I decided that maybe I should move on to administration and see what that could do. And so I accepted the position as Dean of the University of Connecticut School of Dental Medicine and started in 1974 in December. And these were very happy years. I think my time at Connecticut as a dean were very meaningful. I like that position, and I still think that that's probably the best job I ever had.
I'm not sure all the deans will agree with you.
No, but I tell you, to be a dean is right up there. You're not too close to the firing line or to the front line, but you're close enough to deal with students, with faculty, with patients, with parents, with the public, and sometimes with the politicians. And, it's like a rural post office. People are in the door all the time and coming and going. And I thought that, was a very meaningful people's business.
How does that compare to director of NIDR?
Oh, I tell you, it's all the difference in the world. Here I deal with mountains of paper. I don't see people. There I saw people, and and there was less paperwork. And I really liked that job, and I liked University of Connecticut at that time because here was a dental school that wanted to do something in terms of bringing dentistry back to where it came from. And so we had a most fascinating and productive working relationship with the medical school. And the medical dean and I, as a dental dean, we had a joint oversight over the basic science faculty. No faculty member was appointed or promoted without both of us agreeing that that's the way it should be. And I think that put my dental school into a very different relationship. We also had a health center concept where the hospital was right there. The basic sciences and the clinical sciences were together, both in the outpatient area and in the inpatient area. And so here was an entity that really tried to amalgamize, the whole thing and bring people together into a concerted educational effort, but also an effort that had something to do with patient care. So I thought that were very meaningful years. I stayed in Connecticut for 8 years, and I continue to consider those years as being not only productive or meaningful, but probably the best years of my life in the profession.
Tell me about NIDR now.
Well, NIDR has a very special place, in the world of dentistry. It was an unconscionable decision to bring about a dental component in the NIH family in 1948. You have to remember that at that time, in 1948, there were only 2 institutes. It was basically cancer and the Infectious Diseases Institute. The Dental Institute became the 3rd institute. So in terms of, what should I say, stature or age and patina, I think that the Dental Institute has a very strong place in the NIH family. And it was very important for dentistry at that time to get into the mainstream or into an institution like NIH, because that really got dental research on the map, and also into a movement that has increased and increased momentum, throughout these 40 years. I'm sure that everybody knows why Congress decided to establish a dental research institute. It was because 10% of the young people that were recruited for World War II had to be rejected because their oral situation was deplorable, and they could not really serve in the army because they couldn't chew, or they couldn't bite the bullet. They didn't have enough teeth, and the teeth they had were subject to pain and disease, and so they were unfit for service. This came to the knowledge of Congress, and the Congress in 1948 decided we'll have to do something. So we started the Dental Research Institute, and the first agenda item was to try to solve the problem of the magic of the substance in running water that we call fluoride. At that time, there was no water fluoridation. At that time, there wasn't really a good understanding of what fluoride did or could do. But the first director of the NIDR, Dr. H. Trenley Dean, played a significant role in the development of fluoride as a unique and powerful preventive agent in dentistry. He also staged, the first clinical trials, which were huge clinical trials about the efficacy of water fluoridation, or adding fluoride to the water system. And of course, while this was going on, the intermediate observations would show that there were dramatic changes in the caries situation in those that had water fluoridation as compared with those that did not. So they actually had to cut the experiment short and let also the control group get fluorides, the benefit of the system. So this was early 50s, and after that, they continue to develop both the preventive methodology, to broaden the use of fluoride, both in topical applications and in other vehicles. And as we went along, there was a real intramural program developed that has always been very strong. And I knew about NIDR while I was a dental student in Norway, which is an interesting thing, because I think that even today there are some students in this country that doesn't know what NIDR is. And it came about because after in the 50s, in the early 50s, 1950-51, NIDR sent researchers from the NIDR to Europe in order to, provide enough information of what was going on in dental research. And Dave Scott, Dr. Dave Scott, who at that time was the first one to subject dental tissues to electron microscopy, developed a very strong program here in the morphology and function of the hard tissues. And of course, Dave became the fourth director of the NIDR in due course. But these were very exciting years when the electron microscope and ultramicroscopy brought life to some of the dead tissues that were mineralized, but they really came about as living tissues. And I think that had tremendous influence on the understanding of what health and disease of the dentition was, all about.
Given all the advances now in the last 10 years under your tenure as director, do you ever think about changing the name of the institute?
Well, that's an interesting question that I have thought much about the last few years. I think this institute, and also, as I've told you, I think dental education and dental practice are all more than just a focus on teeth. And that dental is only part of the agenda for this institute, for the NIDR, as it is also for life in practice. So that most people think of the NIDR, the Dental Institute, as one institute that takes care of cavities or fillings. But as a matter of fact, I mean, we're running the gamut here of molecular biology, of viral diseases, of bacterial diseases, of genetic anomalies and function or development of the cranium, the jaws, and the face. We are doing immunology at a level that describes both the mechanisms of the basic mechanisms of immunology, but also how it can be used in vaccination. We are dealing with herpes type 1 and type 2, which are essentially oral herpes and genital herpes. We are doing most of the research here on campus in terms of bone research, which has to do with the entire skeleton. We are in charge of pain research, and the leading institute in pain research here at NIH. We see patients with cancer pain, with diabetic pain, and with acute and chronic pain in the back and headache and you name it. So it's not only dental pain, but it's all the things that relate to the sensory mechanisms, including smell and taste and swallowing. So
what name would you pick?
Oh, I think many names come to mind. I have one favorite though that I think is more descriptive of what is happening both here at the Institute and out in dentistry. So this institute should actually be called the National Institute of Dental and Oral Medicine. How is that?
I like it.
Well,
you got my vote.
I don't know, we'll have to see. But again, I'm not in a hurry. I think these things are going to happen. And I wanted also, if there are going to be a name change, I want a significant expansion in the program. And from a financial point of view, this may not be exactly the time to talk about major expansions, and Congress has other national economic problems to deal with. But in due course, I think that a substantial increase in both the scope and the content of NIDR, along with a name change, would be in order as far as I'm concerned.
What do you see on your agenda now for, as you look out 10 years? What would you see as the things that you'd like to accomplish?
Well, I'm not sure that I want to accomplish as much as I think there are certain directions that dentistry need to approach. I think that there is a tremendous need for national leadership, even world leadership, in dentistry. And I've told you about some of the changes that I see are taking place at the moment, but also those that are coming. And that there is a need for a reassessment of dental education and the way oral health care is delivered. I'm also very proud of what has happened. I mean, I've told you about the improvement in oral health and in oral health care here in the United States. I think I'm very cognizant of the fact that without a profession that has a thorough understanding of the role of prevention and the approach to better oral health care, we would never have made this level of oral health that we have in this country. So I'm very proud of the profession, and I have no doubt that there will be new discoveries, there will be new innovations coming from dental research and from scientific activity that will be incorporated into both dental education and dental practice. However, I think the changes are going to be tremendously impacting in the next few decades. And I think that dentistry needs to take a good look at itself at this point and try to size up what this means in terms of both academic activities and the practicing approach to dental practice. I really think that it's important that the profession takes care of these problems on their own, rather than having the circumstance dictate what's going to happen next.
Where will the leadership come from?
I don't know. I hope that it will come from the triad that we see in dentistry, which is science, education, and practice. I mean, these are components of dentistry that have always been of importance to the development of this profession and the discipline. No, I think that we will have to look for the deans to do something, the deans of dental schools, organized dentistry through the American Dental Association, from the National Dental Association, from other professional societies and specialty organizations. I think they all would have to get into the act, and together that we can do something in order to trying to get a better handle of what is happening, and more than that, trying to get a blueprint for what's going to happen in the future. I don't think that this is an impossible task. I think there are enough parameters to deal with, enough signs to recognize in terms of what's happening, and I think we can decide for ourselves actually what we want this to be in both the near and the long future.
And what's Harald Loe going to be doing 10 years from now?
Well, I'm getting mature to the point where I one day would have to decide for myself what's going to be the finale. I very much like what I'm doing at the moment. I have no doubt that the most important component of dentistry is dental research at the moment, and that what we do is going to have tremendous influence on not only the profession but on the public and the public's well-being and the quality of life. I think this is where I want to be at the moment, and I always said, if you want to have impact on something, you have to be in the places where you can decide what's going to happen next. And I think that here with the staff that I have here at NIH, I think we have a power center in dentistry that is not only important to America, but is important to the whole world. There is nothing like it in the world. The NIDR is at the moment also the only game in town here in Washington, almost. So it is very important that NIDR continues to be up front and participates and is able to communicate both with Congress and the administration and serve as a very important link in the chain here between the public and also the profession. So I like what I'm doing. I really do. I think this is the place to be, and I don't have any plans to do anything else in the next few years.
Well, that's wonderful.
Right.
Well, I think this has been just a wonderful conversation with you, and I'm sure all of the folks share my excitement as having an opportunity to share this with you. Before we actually get off the air, though, could you tell me what that pin is in your lapel?
That's an interesting question also. In my life, I have, as you have heard, I have served in many countries. And when I left Denmark, the Queen, Her Majesty, the Queen of Denmark, appointed me as the Knight of Dannebrog, which it's called. And with it comes an order, a decoration, and I had a chance to visit with the Queen before I left, and we had a long discussion and a conversation about dentistry and where dentistry is going. Now, that's not this one. This one I got from His Majesty the King of Norway, and that happened just 2 years ago, where I was appointed to what's called a commander of the Legion of Merit, of the Royal Commander of the Royal Order of Merit or something like that. I can't remember what it exactly is, but it's not important. The important thing was that I had a chance to go back and visit with the King Olaf, and we had an absolutely incredible discussion about oral health care, what has happened. He was a man of 85 years old, and he had lived a long life, and he knew what had happened in for instance, in dentistry over these many years. So I received that order, as you have heard, and this is the little piece that I can use in everyday life, and it reminds me of both my background and some of the experiences that I have.
That's wonderful. Well, this has been just wonderful, and I really enjoyed the time, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dick. It's nice to be part of it.
Thank you.